Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
During my high school years, I was interested in a variety of spiritual and occult subjects. My heightened sense of intuition was usually on alert, and this occasionally got me into a few odd circumstances, especially since I had never shared my empathic ability with friends. One night I was at a medium-sized party in the club basement of a friend's house. Many of the kids were from other high schools, which wasn't unusual. I had been at this particular house before, and my friend's elderly parents rarely interrupted us. I won't lie, there was beer and wine on hand. I was sitting on the sofa, drinking a beer and talking to a girl I had just met. At the circular coffee table, there were 5 or 6 kids gathered around a Ouija board. This was the mid-1970s, and Ouija boards were somewhat popular. In fact, my dad sold these and other divination items in our family's hobby shop. Most people considered Ouija as benign entertainment. I had other ideas, even back then, but I watched in interest. I don't exactly remember who or what they were attempting to contact, but it seemed that things were quickly getting out of hand. One of the girls started complaining that someone was whispering in her ear, and that someone had grabbed her. It was apparent that she was serious and upset. About the same time, I looked at the face of the guy sitting directly across from this girl. He had a strange grin and was staring directly at her. It seemed like he was going to spring across the table and attack her. I became alarmed and remember looking at his eyes and saying to myself, "Stop now." All at once, he shot an evil glance at me. He was really perturbed and his nostrils were flaring. He immediately got up and made his way towards me. The girl I was sitting with saw him coming towards us and screamed. His arms and hands were extended and he attempted to grab me. I was able to maneuver to my right and pull him down on the couch. As I held him, 2 other guys came to my aid. He quickly calmed down and we let him up. He apologized for attacking me. I could sense he had been influenced by something during the board session. As we sat and discussed what had happened, the girl, who had complained earlier, screamed and pointed above the Ouija board. The planchette was hovering freely about 2 feet above the coffee table. Everybody ran towards the opposite side of the basement in an attempt to distance themselves from the hovering planchette. My friend and I stood nearby by the bar as I focused on the object. I had no sense of what was causing this amazing anomaly. My friend continued to say, "What is it? What is it?" Suddenly the planchette crashed down onto the board with deliberate force, breaking one of its legs. The bottles and glasses on the coffee table flew off in all directions. Those kids on the opposite side of the basement made a quick beeline towards and up the stairs, then out the kitchen door. Party over. I have not disclosed names because some of those kids who attended that party maintain that this event has haunted them, even to this day. The girl who was attacked during the Ouija board session had a short life. I don't know the intimate details, but I was made aware through other acquaintances that she died during a brutal attack and robbery in Texas in 1987. I have had sporadic, but continued contact with a few of those people who were there that night. Most of them have had tough lives. At least one swears something evil attached to them that night at the party and harassed them for many years. It's obvious to me that something malevolent was summoned during that party. I don't know what was said or requested by those participating, but I sincerely believe some of them suffered the consequences.
My story happened back in the early 1990s when I was in college in North Carolina. Me and some of my friends got into playing with the Ouija board. We had been doing it for several weeks and had many contacts with spirits. I was skeptical about the whole thing and figured someone was pushing the thing around the board. One girl was particularly into it and the board seemed more active when she was around. I often thought she was pushing it even if it was subconsciously. Some of my friends felt the same way, but she was good looking, so we went with it. One night we were really into it and got the great idea to go do it in a cemetery. I really don't get scared by much, so I agreed. I led the way in my car and really didn't know where I was going. We went up in the mountains and drove until I found a cemetery with a light so we could see what was going on. We all got out. There were 6 or 7 of us in 2 vehicles. Well, we gathered around and 4 people got on the board. Not the girl, because she didn't want us to think she was moving it around. She did ask the questions though, because, like I said, she seemed to get a contact all the time. Well, it didn't take long and she was talking to a spirit, asking the basic questions. I, for some reason, was just walking and looking around at the time, listening to what was going on. She asked the name of the spirit, and, of course, it was taking time to spell out. When they were finished, she said the name and asked if that was right, and the cursor went to yes. As she said the name, I looked at the headstone I was standing by. I said, "Did you say so and so?" And they said yes, and my hair stood up and I went cold. That's the name on this headstone. A couple guys thought I was messing with them, so they looked. Everyone freaked when they found out I wasn't lying. We bolted for the cars and got the heck out of there. I know everyone is a skeptic when it comes to that Ouija board, but there is no way it could have been fake to have me standing right next to the headstone. After that, I wondered if that girl was just tuned into that stuff and not pushing it around.
I was 16 and living in Massachusetts when I first saw a real Ouija board in use. I went to my friend's house on a Friday night. His father used to buy us all beer and let us drink in his apartment. His mother was kind of hippie-ish and very much into witchcraft and things of that nature. My friends and I were all playing PlayStation one night and knocking back beers. I had just finished my beer and went to the kitchen to grab another, when I noticed all the lights were off and lit candles on the table. My friend's mother and 2 other girls were sitting at the table with an Ouija board. This wasn't one of those Milton Bradley boards you buy in a store. This thing looked ancient. It was a huge circle with all the letters, numbers, and every spelled out word you could think of. The 2 girls had their hands on the planchette and my friend's mother had a pad and pen. As I walked by, I snickered to myself and shook my head. I remember one of the girls asking me what was so funny. As I turned to walk back to my friend's room, one of the girls said,
Wait, come here and try this real quick if you think it's so funny.
So I did, and 8 years later it still creeps me out to talk about it. As soon as I put my hand on this thing, it began whirling around, spelling out my first and last name. I was very impressed because neither of these girls knew who I was, or at least I didn't think they did. The girls asked who we were speaking with. The board spelled out, "This is AJ." So I began asking questions about the future, still in disbelief. It answered all of them, but still these were future questions that I was asking out loud. Anyone with their hand on this thing could be moving it to make any response they wanted. So I asked the girls, does this work if I ask a question in my mind? They told me to concentrate on a question and usually the spirit will answer. So I did. The board spelled out your die 51. I was shocked. One of the girls said,
Oh boy, you just asked it when you were gonna die. That's not always a good idea.
I asked one final question before ending my session. I asked, AJ, what is my mother's middle name? Immediately the board spelled out Jean. I remember taking my hand off and my eyes welling up. That was when I knew right there that it wasn't the girls who were playing some magic trick on me. By this time all my friends were standing behind me laughing. I ran into the other room and sat down. A few came in telling me I had too much to drink, but I know what I saw happen. Several of my friends tried to use it after me, but nothing worked for them, so of course this led them to believe I was just drunk and making this up in my mind. I was not drunk that night and was in no doubt in contact with this energy who called himself AJ. I didn't tell anyone this story for years. Only recently did I tell my mother all about it. I told her how this spirit knew her middle name and my name. When I told her his name was a J, she thought for a minute and said,
You know, you had a great uncle named Armand Jones, but no one ever called him that. He was always called AJ.
I never knew of this man prior. For a while I dwelled on the whole dead at 51 remark, but not so much now because some of the other future type questions I was asking that night didn't come true. Maybe these spirits are just having fun with us. When people say I never want to touch a Ouija board again, I agree. Today I would very much like to use a board again, but would be a little more careful with my questions. However, I am 25 years old now and most people would call that sort of thing child's play.
Didn't happen to me, but did happen to my aunt. Be my aunt. Be high schooler. Parents are out of the house. Brothers hanging out with friends. Invite friends over. Friend brings Ouija board, suggests we play. Play for a bit, typical Ouija shit happens, planchette moves on its own. Aunt doesn't really buy it. Then shit gets real. She didn't tell me what it spelled out, but that was when she got nervous. Candles suddenly blow out. Clear, loud footsteps even though they are definitely alone. Aunt gets up, saying that she's done with this. Aunt walks past a mirror and glances at it. She didn't tell me what she saw, but I believe her story because she started crying. She just said, it wasn't me. They did the close off ritual or whatever it is after the mirror incident and the activity stopped. I feel kinda bad for posting the story because she doesn't want me talking about it, but I figured anonymously is fine. She never spoke of it again, which she warned me she would do, and I was told by my dad to never bring it up ever again to her. She was that traumatized by whatever she saw. Not sure if she ever told anyone what she saw, All I know is that when I asked my dad about that night, he said he remembered coming home to find his sister sobbing uncontrollably on the floor, with every single light in the house on. Said it took over an hour of him consoling her before she could tell him what happened.
I had something happen while I was studying at college back about 12 years ago. My college friends and I would sometimes get bored in our spare time. We often spoke about what it would be like to try a Ouija board. I had read many bad accounts, but we were curious. I have always believed that there was some kind of life after death and that spirits moved among us. One evening, one of my friends came into the student union carrying an old Ouija board. He said that he had bought it at a second-hand shop in town. There were 5 of us, so we decided to use one of the old study rooms in my dorm. We closed all the doors and turned off all the lights. We sat around a small wooden game table and laid the board facing me. I had never done this before and was a bit hesitant. The others encouraged me, they were hesitant as well. We all placed our fingertips on the planchette while I asked if any spirit was with us, to let its presence be known to us. I continued this for another 15 minutes. Nothing happened. We all assumed that this was a waste of time, so we pushed the board aside and decided to go to my room to play video games. We thought nothing had happened. But I must have caused something to enter the room and into our lives. Since that night I have never felt the same. I am constantly filled with fear and trepidation. Several years later, I moved away with my boyfriend and his young daughter. I always feel like I'm being watched in my apartment. One late night I was on my way to the kitchen, and as I walked out of my dining room doorway there was a tall shadow-like figure standing in front of me. There was no face, nothing to look at. There was just a heavy black outline of something that wasn't human, but stood on 2 legs. Not knowing what to do, I said "excuse me," and it actually moved out of my way. Since that night, my boyfriend's 5-year-old daughter complains about monsters in her bedroom and occasionally screams in her sleep. It's starting to freak us out. The fear I have had since that night with the Ouija board is so much worse than before. I don't know what this is or what it means, but I am scared to be alone and I can't carry on like this. For some reason, I know deep inside that the Ouija board is responsible for this shadow figure and the other things being seen.
Hello Anon. I'm writing to you because I'm afraid. I believe a certain something is attached to me and I don't know what to do. Before I tell my story, I want to clarify that I'm actually looking for help. I am telling the truth to the best of my ability and I am in no way trying to stir up anything unnecessary and I am not trolling in any way. I hope this is the right board to post this on. I'm not very familiar with making posts on this gentleman's site. A couple of years ago, I think it was around 2017, I played Ouija board for the first time. If you don't know what it is, look it up. You have most likely seen the game referenced in pop culture or someone you know have tried it. It's also called a spirit board. I played it for the first time with my Iranian ex-friend who was my neighbor at the time. At the time we were pretty good buddies. We smoked a lot of joints together, we played tennis together and just generally hung out a lot because we were neighbors. He was a strange guy. He gambled like crazy, spent almost all his money on weed, and he found the weirdest things incredibly funny. He loved the song Du hast by Rammstein. He kept singing Hast du ein Totenschläger from the chorus very enthusiastically. I never told him that the real line is Willst du bist der Tod scheiden, which is the classic marriage vow, do you until death do you part? We had so much fun singing his version that it didn't matter that it was completely wrong. The reason I'm going into detail about this guy is because something important happened with him and he was the first person I played Ouija board with. One day my neighbor, let's call him B, is completely psychotic. B comes to my door and asks me if I was at home in my apartment the previous night. I say no. He is in a very distrusting paranoid mood this day and most likely also incredibly high. I still remember his red, predatory eyes. He starts babbling about my lights being turned on in my apartment the previous night, so I must have been at home, so I must be lying to him. I repeat to him that I wasn't home yesterday and ask why it even matters. Why should he care if I'm home or not? He gets furious. I asked him if we can continue this conversation inside his apartment because at that time, when he rang my door, I was having 2 friends over. In B's apartment things get out of hand and suddenly we're semi-fighting. I try to leave, but that guy grabs my throat and suddenly we're standing in another room and he has got me in a tight headlock. I still remember how I for a moment wished for him to choke me out because I was depressed at that period in my life. But I gained my senses and I politely and slowly told him that I couldn't breathe. He loosened his grip and I escaped back into my apartment. Me and my friends call the cops on him and quite interestingly they don't do shit. They want us to figure out the situation ourselves. Back then I was really mad that they didn't drag him to the station since he was right next door and he had tried to kill me. But in retrospect I think it was good that they didn't confront him because he was psychotic that day and he ended up turning himself in the next day. I moved away from that place and I even visited him a few weeks back and told him that I had forgiven him. We're not friends anymore because we never really had that much in common to begin with. Since then I have taken up jiu-jitsu because I decided I would never let such a loser get me in a headlock again. Now, Anon. Let's go back to the reason I'm telling you all this. I played Ouija with B and nothing happened with the marker. Since then I have played it a handful of times with different friend groups. Nothing happened those times either. But stay with me, this is not the end of the story. Something did happen the most recent time I played it, which I think was in the fall of 2019 or 2020. I seriously can't remember because I'm 28. I'm getting old. It is said that whenever you are playing the game, the players open themselves up to the other side. Just because the marker doesn't move doesn't mean no one is watching you. No one truly knows how spirits work. They could be manifestations of still unknown physical or psychological phenomena, or they could be all kinds of ancestors and ephemeral creatures constantly walking the earth to watch over us or to restlessly and invisibly thing with human beings. I just know I believe in that shit now and I terribly regret playing the Ouija board. Seriously, don't do it unless you are prepared for the absolute worst. Most likely you aren't. Most likely you don't believe in this shit and that's what's keeping you safe. Your eyes are innocently closed to the reality of the paranormal. Stay that way unless you want to sleep like shit for the rest of your life and you want to enter the world of paranoia. The final time I played Ouija the marker moved. I was playing with 2 friends of mine. A couple. He, an extremely spaced out stoner hippie. She is an interesting and beautiful go-getter Latino chick. It was a really strange experience because the marker moved and it felt quite real. But disappointingly it didn't spell out any tangible words. I was so close to shitting my pants when it actually moved. We asked the spirit many questions in different languages. But all we could settle on was that it was maybe a child that couldn't spell or a spirit that just didn't feel like spelling something out that day. I was suspicious that it could have been my friend's subconscious that moved their fingers on the marker. It's impossible to say. But it felt very real to me. And they are not the kind of people who would screw with the board. They respect the board. Always respect the board if you're going to play Ouija. Never ever do it as a casual party game, when you're drunk or something stupid like that. Heed my warning. Fast forward to New Year's Eve 2021. I'm pissed drunk and it's like 6 a.m. and I'm finally giving up for the night. I enter my apartment and I pass out on my bed. I wake up because something or someone punches me hard on the shoulder. I sit up confused and wonder if I'm getting robbed, etc. But I'm alone in my room. It is now June 17th in Denmark. Since New Year's Eve I have been going out of my mind. I've been hearing voices. I've been hearing sounds. I've had nightmares and visions. I've had objects disappear. Sometimes they show up again. But sometimes they don't. And I'm gonna be honest with you, Anon. I have the mental diagnosis of schizophrenia. So I never know when it is bothering me or when I'm just plain old insane. When I try to sleep it's like the spirit is whispering in my ear. It's hard to explain because it's not exactly words. It's just this unfathomably itchy sensation like something or someone is blowing cursed air into my ear. I also have what are either very strong tactile hallucinations or either a poltergeist putting needles into my body. Try not getting good sleep for half a year. Try that, anon. As I'm writing this, I am in the psych ward for the second time this year. I can't sleep because there is a loud banging sound from the cupboard. It repeats every 5 minutes. The window is closed. There is no wind. At least I'm not alone. There is staff here. But normies aren't really known for believing in ghosts when you have schizophrenia. I can go out into the yard and smoke. But I can't sleep. If I sleep, my ears get raped by an unknown force, or I get a hellish nightmare with those eyes. Anon, help me. Give me some advice. I'm begging you.
Hey, long-time lurker, first-time poster. My fiance and I purchased an original 1920 Ouija board about 2 months ago. We've never played the board, just let it sit in the shipping box until we had a glass table to put it in. Before we got the board, my daughter was waking up about once night at random times, and I thought nothing of it. She wouldn't sleep unless all the lights were off, and she said she was scared. After getting the board, I've noticed she wakes up between 3 to 3:30 a.m. every night crying and saying she's scared. I don't really believe in the powers associated with Ouija boards, so I never thought anything of it and just chalked it up to me associating paranormal movies with real life. Then last night it happened again, but this time it's different. She refuses to fall back asleep to the point I let her sleep with us in our bed. This morning when she wakes up, she immediately starts talking about the spook in her room last night that was scaring her. She then went on to say that 2 tall spooks were standing next to our bed and talking to her while trying to touch her pajamas. Then she told me they opened the door, closet or bedroom, but the bedroom door was locked, and asked her if she would go with them. That's all I've been able to get out of her so far, but I took a video of her explaining everything. I asked multiple times. The story doesn't change, and it's so descriptive for a 2.5-year-old that it has my fiance freaked out. Today while I'm at work, my fiance is going to sage the house, and I didn't really know who else to talk to about this aside from X. Here's a photo of the board.
First, get rid of the board, throw it in the trash and put it at the curb. I can't tell you for certain that's what the problem is, but it's possible, and that thing is going to become her Play-Doh sooner or later anyway, which won't be good. And if you have any worries about it, it's just not worth it to keep it when your kids are there. I had a similar experience with my kid when he was 2 as well. No Ouija board, though. Children are more susceptible to seeing these things and being scared by them. It was waking up each night, being so scared he had to sleep with us, sobbing that he didn't want to go back to bed. For maybe all of that summer. There were a few other incidents while he was awake and I was around that made me think he was seeing stuff as well. Do the saging, maybe light some candles and pray for help if you want. Use those tall prayer candles and leave them lit until they burn out on their own, about a week. You can also, after the board is out, throw salt around the outside perimeter of your house. Don't forget to pray though, that's the important part, doesn't matter who to or if you're an atheist or whatever. I have to say, if something is asking her to come with them and trying to influence her in any way, that's pretty goddamn scary for her safety. We only had things that watched as far as I can tell. Take this seriously, but don't be scared, use your love of your kid, ability to protect her to face it. Even if it were bullshit, just be strong and don't let it scare you. There are many types of these things with many personalities, just like real people. Get rid of the board, clean out the house, and I hope that's the issue. Good luck and on.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.